But we finally got through to a point and revised some of our approaches to things, and then did this case study in Florida of three counties, taking a good hard look at how they would turn out. Let me share my screen here and make sure you're seeing what I think you are, because I didn't do that yet. And then let me just adjust this deal here on my desktop here before we get going here. So the three counties is Collier County, which includes Naples down at the south tip of Florida, Volusia, which is just to the east of Orlando and Orange County, and was a big player in the year 2000 elections issues. And St. Lucie is near Fort Lauderdale, but down that way on the other side, on the east side. And a quick review of just a very high level for anybody who has not seen this, but I think most everybody has, where big picture is we take the paper ballots are scanned and they create ballot images, and then the vote is extracted to create cast vote records in some form, usually a set of files, and creating the official results that are then distributed. This is the voting system. And then what we're doing is we're taking the ballot images that are produced by those scanners and uploading them to AuditEngine, which runs in the cloud. We do a style analysis and then do a mapping process, and then we extract the vote from the locations where they've been identified as corresponding to the vote for those areas. We create our own set of cast vote records, and then we compare them with what has done before. Now this is kind of different from what maybe some of the other offerings do, where they produce their own cast vote records, but they're not doing this really detailed comparison, at least from what I've seen. And we put out a discrepancy report comparing what we view as voter intent in the best way that we can interpret it, and what the official result is. Usually states are voter intent. That is, if you mark it and you don't, you start to mark it and you, oh, no, I meant the other one, and you mark that one too, then you can put yes by it or circle it or whatever you want to emphasize. And that's supposed to be taken as interpreting your intent. Even though you didn't mark it right, you still intended to vote that way. If it's clear, then you're supposed to take it. But some states don't do that. Michigan is not a voter intent state, and they are very much just, if you didn't fill out the bubble right, then too bad. Now you can read this report, but the counties are kind of medium sized that we looked at. They're not super big. They're not super tiny either. And we had both ES&S and Dominion, but this is St. Lucie is Dominion, but they had the older system that we couldn't get all of the necessary reports that would be good to have. And then we did have a bunch of results listed here. Let me go through quickly what we do when we do this, so you understand how we actually conduct an audit. We have to get the input data, which is the cast vote or the ballot images. So we're trying to get these election officials to preserve them. Almost all of the machines today create ballot images, and they're part of the process. So you can't just say, well, we're just going to delete that. I mean, legitimately, because it is part of the process, the chain of events. The ballot images are created, and then their software takes a look at the images and recognizes what the votes are. So, so the first step is to get the ballot image data, and also what they call CVR files, cast vote record files, which essentially what we want to get is the records that say, for this ballot, this was what the vote was on a ballot by ballot basis. And then we have all of the that's the primary input data that we need. There's some other things that we could possibly use, but this is the sort of the minimum set to do a really good audit. Sometimes, as you'll see, if you read this in Volusia, we got a bit more to try to figure it out. We go through a pre-check phase where we just check over the whole inventory, and this has been really very important. Just getting the numbers right. We're not looking at the vote yet. We're just looking at how many ballots there are. How many ballots are there? How many images are there? And how many people are claimed to have voted? That needs to be pretty close. Also, the cast vote record should match the ballot images. Okay, so all these things should be consistency. And this is a step right here where we thought this would be nothing. We wouldn't have to do anything much in this step. It turns out this step is a really big and important step that would sometimes be a bit harder to to actually get through and rectify the issues. And I'll mention that for Volusia, where we had quite a bit of problem at this stage, just figuring this out. And pre-processing is where we basically fill out, if we don't have the CVR files, and then we look at all the ballot images and extract the information that we need to understand what the styles are that they're actually being used. We derive style templates, which instead of getting original, so masters, if you will, of each style. So let me just say the styles is much more complex than I ever thought when I first started. The style situation is, what are the contests that this voter can vote for in their area, number one. So you live someplace, you've got a certain, mayor, school board, water board, and so forth. And someone down the street might live in a little bit different area. He's got everything the same, but he's in a different school board. So there's little differences of the ballots as you go through. And there can be dozens or hundreds, maybe even thousands of different style ballots based on just that. But you also have language differences. You also have party differences, sometimes in the primaries, different parties. Then you have rotations of the candidates. And if it's a rotating candidate situation where they change the order, all these things go into the different styles. And then we map targets. And this we've gone toward a computer-assisted mapping process where we basically, and I'll show you just a snapshot of this, where it's easy. You just take the mouse and you click on this contest, this candidate or option for it, and you click on the bubble and make that correspondence. And then we do the vote extraction. So we go ahead and extract from all of the ballots, all of the contests. Okay, and this is done in the cloud, and so that we can use up to 10,000 virtual computers, which is approved for us right now. Actually, we could ask for more, but right now 10,000 has been enough for us to complete things pretty well. Nicely, they don't charge you anymore if you use 1,000 at a time, 5,000 at a time, or 10,000 at a time per computer. So it's best to use them in parallel, because then you're getting the most done in the shortest period of time. Then we get some reports out of this. And the most important is a discrepancy report, where we go down to the ballot. I'll show you what that looks like. So with that as an overview, I'm not going to go through every detail here, but you can read that over in terms of what the style determinants are. It says here, like I said, geographic location, party, language, sheet. I forgot that. Different sheets have different styles, because they don't, if you have a multiple sheet ballot, the sheets are treated as separate things as it goes through the system. And that, other than that, was pretty accurate what I said. So we have this target mapper interface, which maybe I can zoom in here a little bit. Usually doesn't work too well because there we go. Where you basically mouse over here, and then you just kind of click on the place where each thing is, and you get it done. And there's ways to copy the mapping and paste it onto the next page. It's only a little bit different than you can you can modify it. And actually, it's pretty fast going through this for most places that are fairly small and don't have tons of styles. Maybe, you can get this done in an hour or two with one person. If it's a really big place, then we're going to be able to have, teams of maybe 10, 30 different people working at the same time, dividing up the work so we can get it all mapped. We were trying to do automatic mapping where, the computer just recognizes what's on here and then magically everything appears. It sounded good, but it's much more complex than we thought because just a wide variety of things that these election districts can do. It's different language. Sometimes you have Chinese on here or Tagalog, and it's just really hard to recognize what's happening. Then we go through these reports. Now, what we found is in our disagreements, we call them disagreements. When we disagree with the voting system, usually it's a voter intent interpretation. Okay, somebody didn't quite make it into the bubble. They meant it, but their mark didn't quite make it in. The X, they use X's or they circle the bubble. We'll see that in a second. But also there's usually stretched or deformed images. Okay, and so we really have to take a look at these. Like this top right here, I've got a better example further down where it's really here we go. So you can see here where basically this ballot as it was going through got stuck for a second. And so then the scanner keeps scanning this one section and stretches everything out. That's kind of funny looking, but it's really a simple process. What it's doing is it's kind of getting delayed right there. And so in the image, it's all stretched out. So we kind of, right now, we're not, even though we could potentially have the code learn to deal with this and kind of just skip over this section right here. And as long as there's not a bubble in there, then, we wouldn't have any trouble with it. But we really wanted to know about this and sort of just reject these so we know how many there are, and then we'll handle them by hand. Now, I have the whole set of videos, in detail, so I'm not going to go into every little detail here today. We do have an adjudication module, which allows us to go through and pick each ballot where there is an issue and decide how it should be if it really gets close. But basically, we're just trying to find, really big problems where potentially the election could flip. And then it comes down to, did you find enough issues so that you need to look into them? If there aren't enough issues, then you may say, all right, it's good enough. We don't have to look at every issue. We can look at them, but not necessarily enter that, the resolution and really get it down to the vote, the single vote. Now, I'm just going to quickly go through these 3 counties, and then we'll go through your questions. Collier County really was very clean. We didn't have any. This was a 2-sheet ballot though, so and it was a little bit simpler because every voter got 2 sheets. It wasn't where only some voters got that second sheet. That makes it a little bit harder to count things. But this is a red county with Trump receiving nearly 62%. So and it was also a ES&S vendor county. They had about they had a total of 417,000 sheets in their election. The first one had a front and a back, and the second one had just a front. So that was easy for us to split out. And initially we saw that there were 78 files of BMD or ballot marking device file types of ballots. The ballot marking device have the barcodes on them, and they're used for disabled voters or somebody else that just wants to use it. So what we can do is we can determine in this first phase is the checking of how many there are. We can check the file sizes of these, and the ones that are big, these big files are the front and back. That'd be page 1. And then the second group here you see is just has one side, so it's really easy to discriminate between these. There's a blob up here and then a no man's land in between. So you can put the threshold anywhere and you'll be able to decide which ones are which. And then down here, you can't even see it, are the BMDs, which are the smallest. So those are easy to discriminate as well. So now with this information, we have, without even looking at the files, we can, the content, we can, by the numbers, see, okay, how did it total up? And when we did this, it was off by 39 ballots. And that was a bit of a problem until I realized that 78 is double 39. The number of BMDs was twice the number that it was off. And then I realized and I discovered what they were doing is they were duplicating the BMD ballot images. So they had two of them exactly the same. And then for those, they had two items in their cast vote record that the first one only had the first contest, just like that would have been sheet 1. And the second one had the second set of contests, which normally would have been sheet 2 as 2 line items, so they looked the same. So once we found that out, so they matched up perfectly. So there was no deviation at all down to the ballot, which is what you'd like to see. You don't want to see any, weirdness. You want to see the counts come down. So they exactly total up. Why can't we have this really? This should be our expectation as the public, that these election officials can total up the number of ballots that they're processing. And so they did a really good job on that. And so so in my report, I give them a big congratulations for doing that. And here you see that we have the number of that we disagree with the voting system, 0.078%. So that's less than, this would be, if it's 1%, it's 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000. So this is less than 1 in 1,000 disagreements. And what we find is, and we'll look at this in a second, is the disagreements we get right about 93% of the time compared to the voting system. As we look down, and what I'm going to do here is now you've seen at this big count. So again, the number of sheets that agreed was 400, almost a total number of sheets. Total number of sheets, remember, was 417,000. The number of blanks. This is usually the second sheet. People don't always fill that out. So it's not like they left their whole ballot blank. They only didn't fill out that second sheet. It's kind of rare for somebody to go to the poll and decide, I did all this work to get here, now I'm not going to vote at all. So usually the ones that are blank are actually the second sheet, okay? And then there's a number of overvotes, which are now, when you get down here, yeah, there's this number of sheets with overvotes, but then sometimes there's more than one contest. Same with the disagreed sheets, there's sometimes more than one problem on the sheet. And then we had 4 failures, which were those stretch ballots. And there's actually a few more than this because some of these don't actually come out at this stage. Now we're going to skip down because I think this is super nice to see and this is yeah, so this is a report you can review in more detail, but just to give you an idea of, well, here's the full discrepancy report. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this and that opens up another page. So this is what the discrepancy report actually, it's going to take a while to load because it goes through the 528 different discrepancies. They're broken down by precinct, which is how they like to consider it. And you can see here, like it's a 0.03% disagreement in precinct 101. Click on that, come down here to the first one. And the contest where we disagree is the #1 constitutional amendment. And the audit system says it was a vote, and it was no. Vote for no. 1 vote there. They said it was an overvote. So if we look down at Constitutional Amendment 1, it's this one here, and you can see here that there's a little, they put a little tiny mark in yes, and they really overpowered the no. trying to make the point that's what they wanted. Okay, so a human being looks at this, they go, yeah, the person wanted to vote for no, end of story, right? But a computer will say, oh, well, that met the threshold, and so therefore this is an overvote. So yeah, they can parse this out later with having a human being take a look at this and adjudicate it. But ours does it most of the time on its own correctly. Now going back to the case study, remember what this looks like. We've got a little thing there and a big blob. And that's this one that we're talking about. So this is an example as we go through it where here it was an overvote. Now here's what it would be an undervote. And this one would not normally be put on for adjudication by the voting system because they never saw anything. They thought, oh, well, this one isn't even there. They didn't touch enough of the no box to get into their system. And so they wouldn't necessarily even review this. And yet we find this is a no. Here's one here where they said overvote. It has this little teeny tiny mark. This guy can't get his pen into the bubble. It happens a lot. You know, some people, it's kind of like using your cell phone. You know, I miss the buttons a lot with my big fingers. Some people, they look at the ballot, they go, there's where the bubble is. They put the pen down, wiggle it around, and they miss the bubble right there. You know, so that's a lot of people, they say, well, that's going to make it. I meant to mark it. But here it's going to come out as an undervote again, and probably not ever caught by the voting system or adjudicated because neither of these bubbles were filled at all. You see that? Here's one where it was stretched. And so this one gets rejected as a stretch, but we know about it. Here's some guy who really wants to know, so he circled it. All right. The key thing for us is that this one is darker than that one. That's what our software looks for. Now, this is kind of a hard one, but I'd say yes versus no. That's what our software said. And on down. So we go on down. Here's another stretched one. Here's, well, this one, they didn't write anything in, even though they colored it in. So no harm done. It was, this cast vote record said it was an overvote. It's still not counted for anything because they didn't fill anything in, but it would have been, you know, counted as an overvote line, but nothing there, and et cetera. And let me go down here to these where these are missing the bubble completely. And so if you just look at that bubble, you're not going to get it. Okay, so we're getting all these. Here's one that we actually didn't get right because they put the word copy. You know, they have, if you look at the actual images of these ballots, let's look at one here. Oh, these are, I'm on the wrong discrepancy report. Okay, so here we go. See that word copy right there, C-O-P-Y. Well, this is the one we're seeing where it isn't this exact ballot, but see how that it goes over that bubble a little bit, and then here it is over that bubble, and we said that was a marginal, you know, possible marginal vote right there. I wish they wouldn't put watermark. You know, we could do a much better job of interpreting this if they didn't add stuff to the images. Maybe we can get that to happen. But and then on down with some other ones here, some other stretch ones that were in the pile of disagreements. I want to show you these down here where the guy who circles them. So here's a person who has a real consistent habit of circling. Here's one where he circled Donald Trump. You know, didn't quite, you know, he should learn how to color that in, but still he wanted this one. And so we said it was a vote for Donald Trump. The CBR said it was an undervote, so they missed that vote. Now this is a case here where almost everything on this ballot 10366 was an issue, so we would want to completely review that. And once we see a few of them or somebody who circles, we want to not just take a look at the to adjudicate the ones that are circled, but are the ones that come up. But realize again that these like this that are circled, the voting system will not ever pull those out for adjudication because as far as they're concerned, it was completely blank. They didn't see anything at all. And then here's one that's actually kind of hard to interpret, but I think if looking at it, it was more yes than no. With the person going all over the place with their pen. And then what I did was I took these very few samples. I only had 36. We'll probably go through and take a look at absolutely all of them to get the really good numbers. But we have of these 36 samples, and if we exclude the stretch, okay, so we're going to exclude the stretch ones. We're only going to be looking at whether we interpreted voter intent properly and not whether or not we could deal with the stretching. And of the ones which were not stretched, 93% of the time we got the answer right amongst these 36 that I just went through. There were two that we didn't interpret right, and you know what? We're going to be continuing to refine our method, which is we call it a adaptive thresholding method, and something we might actually go and get a paper written about or something like that, because no one else is doing this approach. And we'd like to get more samples too. We'll just go through. What we'll do is we'll just go through all of them. I do want to mention one thing in this other, the one I have up here. This was actually, we were working on this for Bartow County, Georgia. This is another county that we've been practicing on and checking how how effective we are on this. And in this case, what we're doing is we are completely reading these for these are called the BMD ballot, okay, ballot marking device. This is the Dominion style, the same kind that's used in Maricopa County, Arizona, and other places that use Dominion have the same kind. And your vote is encoded in this QR code up here. And there can be a bunch of these. You can have up to 5 of these across. And sometimes this list can wrap down around to the back. But what we do is we OCR this list right here and we interpret that. And right now, the only thing that we're sometimes dealing with is the write-ins. A lot of people will write in just anything, and they don't realize that you have to have what's called a qualified write-in before you can, otherwise the joke is Mickey Mouse would have been president a long time ago. But this Benjamin Carson, he's not Ben Carson, he was not really a candidate for president. So you don't just get, even though you may like him, he's not running. So you can't just write him in and it's not going to be accepted. So these sometimes are, in this case, it's kind of easy because they type it in and we can check, okay, does Benjamin Carson, does that match any of the accepted write-ins? But that is, I just wanted to show you what this ballot marking device and our approach to handling it, where we look over these typed out entries instead of decoding this QR code and figuring out what the bits mean. Even though we're going to be doing that too, just to double check everything. And we've designed a way so that we can automatically decode, figure out what the bits mean in this if it meets certain criteria. All right, so that is, I see Neil has his hand up. Why don't we handle your question right now, Neil, before we go on to the other counties?
Hi, thanks, Ray. So did you look at first of all, did you look at the stretched ballots to see in those cases which system was the right? I'm assuming that the real voting system, the one actually in use, interpreted
okay, so your audio,
those stretched ballots.
Your audio just got stretched out. What did you say? So we're assuming that we've looked at the system. So yeah, we did try to correlate, because this would be kind of important. If we find that one, like voting machine, is stretching ballots really badly, we'd like to feed back that information to the election officials and say, look, this machine just isn't working very well, and you need to clean it, or you need to maybe take it out of service because it's not doing a very good job. So I think that would be good, constructive feedback for the election official to say, And that's information that we only get when we look at the actual images produced by the voting system. If we,
Yeah,
yeah. So go ahead.
I agree. It'd be great to get the actual, I mean, to point those issues out. But I'm just wondering, would it be a more fair comparison to also compare your system against theirs for the stretched ballots?
It would, but I still think it's only fair if we put those in a separate category, because I don't actually know what the voting system is doing in the process of interpreting these. We do have a plan for trying to, you know, basically skip over these sections that might be stretched out of shape and still decode the rest of it. Even if we do that, though, it's not something that I would trust 100% without reviewing them. And when we process these, we don't get to know in these counties here whether they've been adjudicated or not. So we don't know how they've handled these. So we, you know, so to say, okay, well, we're going to be able to test our system against theirs. We also have to know, did they hand adjudicate them to know that? So
do you have a count of all the stretched ballots independent of the discrepancies, or?
They're right now, it depends on how bad they are. Like these right here that did get through our first line of defense, if you will, they got aligned and they got, you know, fit into our format. So we were able to align them and register them and do the other things that need to happen. But they weren't stretched out so much that we couldn't deal with that. And so we had 4 that were so bad we couldn't deal with them at all. Okay, so those we have to obviously review by hand. But, you know, we don't see very much of this at all in the newer system. So in like the new Dominion systems in Georgia, we just didn't see the stretched out ballots. This is mostly an attribute of the older ES&S or the older Dominion systems. Okay, now let's just quickly cover these other counties about what happened there. And I'm going to skip first to St. Lucie because it actually was pretty simple. Let's see, let me get down to the actual St. Lucie section. St. Lucie is a ES&S county. I'm sorry, a Dominion county. So they're the same type of machine as, you know, Georgia uses and Maricopa County use. And the trouble there is they have one of the oldest systems. And so we did not get the detailed cast vote record that we would like to have, even though there may be some ways to work around that. We don't think it's worth it at this stage because these are the old systems. And so why should we spend a lot of time trying to adapt to a super old system? And just really quickly, we had some problem with our initial archives. We had to go to sort of dig into those, and we found out that one piece of it was duplicated. So we had a whole big chunk of duplicated ballots, maybe, I don't know, 40,000 duplicated ballots that were exactly the same in the archive. So we had to figure out how to delete, you know, remove those without. And, you know, again, the way we're operating here is we're not doing this under contract with these counties. We're an independent auditing entity in this case. So they're not always that helpful. You know, when you approach them that way, they don't always want you to be successful providing oversight, even though these counties were very, very cooperative when we asked them for things. But in this case, they just couldn't, they couldn't provide the report that we needed. So once we got that resolved and getting that the archives figured out, it only has one sheet. So this is a super simple situation. We don't have to do a lot there. So we can see, you know, exactly, you know, these are the different types. You can see the different little bumps here. This is the prevalence of certain size files, and that relates to the different styles that are there. And you could probably split this up if you knew enough. And what they do is they have they have this encoding in the ballot different places that we were going to use for trying to separate them out into precincts and other things without them providing all the information that we wanted. And this little data matrix code we thought would be really good, but this only appears on some of the ballots. This, what they use this for, is the print shop that prints their ballots puts this on. And they also have a cutout in the envelope so that they can pre-stuff these envelopes with the ballot and not have them addressed yet. And then be able to say, oh, John Doe, oh yeah, he needs ballot number N85. You just get one of those. It reads it through the little window and prints the right name on it. So they don't have to, they can pre-stuff all of the ballots and then decide who's going to get what later. Pretty cool thing. And this is really easy to read. These are like a QR code. They're not as big, if you will. In other words, you can't put as much information in them, but they're really reliable. Whereas these other things of trying to read this precinct or read this N85 is a lot more difficult to do. And there's other ways to try to get them into precincts if we know enough. But we just were exploring our ability to read stuff like this. And if you rely upon these things for the kind of really close, kind of numbers that we have, these are not reliable enough because there'll be a streak through it or something else. It's sometimes hard to read. And when you're doing hundreds of thousands, and you can't get it exactly right each time, and you're using that as a basis for comparison or something, you really can't have something that is not completely reliable on the ballot. And the data matrix code would be, but they just didn't put them on. They didn't put this big N85 one all the time either. You take that off and then this one moves over to the side. So there's like 1, 2, 3, and then 4 with this moved over places you could possibly look. And we do look at all the places, tried to figure that out, and decided that for now anyway, unless we're hoping that the places like this will upgrade so we have the better cast vote record. But even with that said, we're able to look at we also had a difference here of something like 526 ballot images over the number of ballots officially cast. They have also the habit here of putting the word not cast in there. Like they have a ballot image and then it's got the name not cast, put in front of it, meaning, okay, well, just don't look at this one. This was the first time we saw this. So that we're not sure why they had the not cast ballots. Maybe it's a good thing that they're recording everything so that we can see, exactly what did happen. But there was 4,854 not casts. All right. And then at the end, we had 526 ballot images over the number officially cast. Now, there's going to be some explanation for that, but we did not try to explore that issue. We just proceeded the best we could with looking at the end result here. And basically, the total number of ballots cast was off slightly. It didn't come down to the exact, like it was in Collier County, where we had the exact number. And it was first off by 39, and we resolved that. This type of thing could probably be resolved with a little bit more work and interaction with the officials. You can see some of them, the overvotes we had exact, and this is just between, we're just looking at this one contest, the president vice presidential contest. We had exactly the number of overvotes. Donald Trump and Joe Biden had, and the contestants had a slightly different number of number of votes, except some of them matched perfectly. These went up, one down. That's probably due to, as I said, as you saw, the interpretation of voter intent, because we do a better job of interpreting voter intent than the election system does. So our numbers are probably better. But, we'd have to look into it to see. if we thought it was off. But if you take a look at the percentages, here we have 50.38% in the official output, and ours was 50.40%. So the difference was a 0.02% change, and that was a change of these 123 versus -3. So we get it down to very, very close, and then the next step is you have to make a determination, like how much more work do we want to do to try to resolve these last few issues. If you say, well, how many failed, how far off is it, how close is it, how many do we have any disagreements on, then you can decide what the next step is. Should we go through every ballot or not, and decide what it is? Because we don't have to, we're not trying to make an exact result here. We're just trying to check the official result and see if it makes sense. Okay, now finally, sort of the big one, if you will, is Volusia. Volusia had the most problems, even though they were extremely cooperative people that we were working with. And we think that it's only fair to say that, yeah, they made some mistakes, but mostly this had to do with ES&S system being not very good in terms of helping them along to not make mistakes. Volusia had 309,000 ballots cast. Most of them just have one sheet, and there was about 50,000 that had two sheets. Some of the two sheets only had a front, but some had a front and a back. So it's hard to tell just by size. That second set there was just like a sheet one. And so we had to go through that. I will say that Volusia was featured in the HBO documentary called Hacking Democracy. If you haven't seen that, it's fun to watch. Where they had 16,000 negative votes reported for Al Gore in a precinct where only 219 people voted. So that was a bit of a problem. So we did have open dialogue and cooperation, and I do want to thank Susan Pinchon for her work on that, and of course the scrutineers for helping us get the ballot images, and all these in Florida. They really helped us. So the first step was ballot inventory. Initially, we had 24 archives, and one of them was a duplicate. Even though it had a different number on the outside, it was double zipped, and on the inside, it was the same as another one. So he says, you're off by 41,000 ballots. Please do it again and give us the rest. And so they did. They gave us finally 34 zip archives, with each being about 4 gigabytes. All right. Then the first step, as I said in the process, is we analyze those files and to kind of get a first cut as to what they are, without actually looking at the details of what's in them. And to do that by size. And this plot is pretty interesting because it's sort of weirdness, okay? So we have a bunch of ballots up here which have two sides, all right? That's what you interpret those. These down here have only one side, and then this little teeny tiny little thing down there, those are the BMD ballots, ballot marking device ballots. Those only have one side, and they're also smaller. So first cut, you might say, well, this is sheet one, but the problem is that sometimes sheet two has two sides as well, and so you can't put them in there. But one thing that we did find that's very, very interesting is that this very nice looking Gaussian distribution up here is the same, effectively the same as this big peak down here, which is so much smaller. And after looking into that, we found that it had to do with the gray backgrounds. So these gray backgrounds that some people put on to try to make the titles look better, number one, they don't scan very well. They make a lot of little dots, and they don't compress very well. And so therefore, this one here was over 600 kilobytes. Not that it's huge, but it's still way bigger than 260. 260, and they have these clear things, and the titles are just fine. You can tell that they're titles, but that is really small. And just to make the point, if you had a 4 GB USB flash drive, which a lot of them use and they complain, we can't put enough on here. Yeah, it can hold 6,666 images with gray backgrounds, but 20,000 if you get rid of the gray backgrounds. Very important. Okay, so this is an important finding for us, is to tell these election officials, please don't use gray backgrounds. Now, if nothing else, this is the kind of feedback where, take a look, what we're doing is we're taking a really close look at what they're doing. And we're able to see if the files are right, if they're the right size, if they're, wasting memory somewhere and then complaining that they can't do something. So we had to go back and review the sheet 1 and sheet 2, not just based on strict size, but breaking it down by which ballots had that sheet 1 and sheet 2. And then we did have the count here of 364,423, which still didn't match. And it's supposed to be 309,367. So we had just a raw count of 4,367 excessive ballot images that were in the system. As we look and we checked the cast vote record file, it actually matched the number of ballot images exactly. So the cast vote record file, which is a detailed ballot by ballot, ballot image by ballot image, what the results were for that, and the cast vote record were this 364 in the cast vote record matched the ballot images, but they didn't match the official results. That's what we were looking into. Took a lot of work to figure this out. I took and I did this by hand because I didn't trust anything at this point. Like, I don't want any software involved. I just want to basically total this up by hand. And I found in the various precincts, and only detailed the ones that were different here, but in the various precincts, there was some down here with vast numbers off. Sometimes 502, okay, off, of additional ballot images that did not have any results. And then we had these yellow ones here, which were no ballot images, but official results. Okay, so we had two different things going on. And when you offset these, you got the 4,367. But it turns out that these were 537 additionals that should have been there, and ballot images that weren't there that should have been, and then 4,904 that were extra. We looked at the voter history file and we got essentially the same number, except that maybe 66 voters checked in but left without voting, just left with their ballot. That seems like it's possible for sure. So it's reasonable that the official results are right, and then we still had 4,904 off. We found then that they had a not top secret, but not reported in their conduct of elections report. They had to rescan. So when they came in the data from the first USB drive from these early voting sites, they read them. So, and there's one area called New Smyrna Beach. They have two machines there. I'm sorry. Yeah, they have at least two machines. It's early voting. They have a lot of ballots in this early voting site, thousands. They bring that in before the polls are closed, and they read them in to the system, which is allowed by law. And then they tried doing that. So they brought in the first one. They read the drive, was fine. The second one, though, failed to read. Okay, so what they said was, okay, we're just going to start over. This is not going too well. Let's just delete everything. We'll rescan those from New Smyrna Beach and we'll get a clean start. They did, but turns out they did not. They tried to delete them, but part of them didn't delete. And this is a very interesting thing. They did not actually get the CVR files, nor the image just did not delete. But the results were deleted. And I'm going to go over that and explain it to you because it took me a while to understand this. First, just know what happened. Then we did find that they did, so when they rescanned them, they piled on to the ones that were there. So we got ballot images duplicated. And you can see here, even though these ballots have different ID numbers, they are duplicated in their set. All right. And that, this one we're pretty clear. And, you know, the scan here, probably this was the streaks that came out of the cheapo scanner that they have in the precinct. This was done in the central office with a better scanner. And obviously these are the same ballot, no question, right? You can see that this is very distinctive, but different ballot numbers. So they've been duplicated. There's no way to check these digitally. Well, you may some extreme way, but you just can't check the files. They're not going to be the same. Rescan. So really they're very different. We also went through the poll tapes and we found, and this was the other problem, that yellow section that you can see here that normally, like in precincts voting center that includes precincts 410, 411, and 427, they had unit 1 and unit 2. That means they have 2 voting machines in that site. And they got both of them there. But in this site where they had precincts 415 and 416, they also had 2 voting machines, but they only read in one. Only read in one. So in our digital poll tape, we only got one of these. And then when we went through the errors on that, we found out that the numbers that were off was exactly what I showed you in that yellow section, because they didn't read this one in. Now, let me show you a different picture of this, because I finally got a kind of a good way to see this. And what they effectively have is 2 tabulations inside their vote, what they call the election management system. So the election management system is a place that handles the whole election and also totals everything up. Okay, so when they brought in those first thumb drives right here, they read those in from that early voting site. It goes into this tabulation 1 and totals up there. And I visualize this in my mind as a bunch of counters, you know, where they look at what comes in here and they increment the counters enough for each one of the things. It's not really data that's a table that you can save. It's just the counters being counted, which I view as not a very good way to implement it. But it seems like that's how they're doing it. Then that goes also into tabulation 2. So that adds to the cast vote records and the ballot images, which are in this section. Then they said clear command. They cleared this one, but not this one. There is no clear command that goes to this one. Then they did central scanning of those same ballots. Those went in here and went in here, duplicating them. So we have ballot images are duplicated and the cast vote record entries are duplicated. But these are not duplicated because these got hit by the clear command. Then we had later cellular uploads from all the voting machines in the field. That goes only into this table and not into this one. Then they get election day thumb drives, and those have the results and the ballot images, and those only go into this tabulation 2. But not all of them were uploaded. So they never did find out, because tabulation 1 is the one that's used for the official reports. Tabulation 2 is used for the cast vote record and ballot image exports that we get. And they never do a comparison here between these. They never found out that they did not upload that thing. And even though ES&S goes to great lengths to say, oh, we don't rely upon these cellular uploads, my view is hogwash. You are too, because you're not ever checking them. Otherwise, you would have found this. And you would have told them, we didn't get that other upload. You need to upload that. Now, I think it's pretty sad that they're building this table, which is a cast vote record table, and they're not using that for their ultimate reports here. This line is missing. They do not use this tabulation 2 for their ultimate report. They use this other one. And I'm thinking this could be a bit of an issue to have two tabulations going on, where you can have one of them be completely consistent, and that's the one that you give to people, and modify the other one and have the reports get back to that one. Now, how that would actually be used for some kind of nefarious purpose, I'm not sure, but still, this is not a good scenario to have these two. So this, based on how this turned out in Volusia, this is where we have a few findings here about this, that now we know that the cellular uploads are never checked. We know that the thumb drives that come in, and this is where we were also getting our electronic poll tapes from this information. That's not necessarily used in this official report. So this, these election day thumb drives may not have all the information, because if they don't do this, we're not going to get the digital thumb drive report, which happens like right there. And what we were doing in our analysis of that was we were comparing with the EL30A, that final report, or something like it, and this point, which is still a pretty valid thing to do. Because they're coming into this tabulation, and this is coming out of that tabulation. And we'd like to get a check on it. Those are the same. Also, this part here, no comparison is performed by ES&S to know that these are different. Now, in Collier County, these were exactly the same. We had exact correspondence. We weren't off by 4,904. The 4,904 happened because this clear command cleared this out and not this, and they didn't add up they didn't include everything from the machines into this database, even though they got all the cellular uploads. Big problem to me is that they never compare the cellular uploads with the election day thumb drives. So there's a number of quality issues here, right? This did not affect the outcome of the election, because they did use these official reports that were based on this tabulation that did get cleared. And apparently the cellular uploads were pretty good. But still, what we had to deal with was the CVR and ballot image exports that were way off, but consistent amongst themselves. So we still did now I go back to the issue, the actual discrepancies. And this is something that I do have to complain about Volusia here, though, even though most of this we can blame on ES&S for their bad software. The conduct of election report. Okay, so what does the law say? You're supposed to report on all equipment or software malfunctions at the precinct level, at a counting location, within a computer, blah, 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 and all the steps taken to account for them. So when that device failed, they had to rescan, they had to clear it out. They should have reported on that. It's the law, and they didn't do it, even though it was public. Susan Penchon, that's her county, she said they did show to the public that they were rescanning those. So it wasn't a secret, but it just wasn't reported. And that's what we're trying to look at. Let's take a look at your reports and see what they look like. And you see, they didn't check the problem. With that said, though, we still got agreed to 99.77%. And the disagreements, there was 864 sheets that disagreed. It's the same kind of thing. We only had 26 that failed. And each one of these is the same kind of deal, where at the end of this report, you can see, so for a given county, like if you click on the link here, I think I just click it, it goes into a new page. Yeah, so here's the discrepancy report for Volusia. And it's the same sort of report I showed you, going down to the very first one, Fifth Court of Appeal, Evander. We said a yes vote. They said it was an overvote. Okay, so here it is. If you can see, they wanted to vote yes. They put a little thing on no, but they meant yes. So this is another example where we get it right most of the time with our evaluation of voter and automatic evaluation of voter intent. So generally speaking, what you see is a difference. A disagreement is generally we're getting it right, except for those cases where that disagreement comes about because of the stretch ballot issue. And so that is where we are there with those. We also did, by the way, and I was showing you this earlier, this discrepancy report for Bartow County, which is this has a little bit, this is the Dominion system in Georgia, newer. Doesn't have those stretch ballots so much, but what they do is they do adjudication of the write-ins. And so almost all of these, about 2% that we have that are off here, we did not adjudicate the write-ins, and they did. And they said, that's not a write-in. You know, that you said Mickey Mouse, that's not a candidate. And we would say they had a write-in, but we didn't try to figure it out. So we're gonna add a little bit of code here to differentiate between the write-ins and also try to deal with what they might be, so that we can pin this down a little bit more. Because in these ballots, like in this disagreement, let's go to the first one. It's a write-in. You look at the thing, the guy tried to write in Teagan Ritchie. That's not a candidate. So we would have to look at the words Teagan Ritchie and say, okay, that's not a valid candidate. And then say, okay, well, this was, what did they call it? They said it was a undervote. So we would call it an undervote because that's not a legitimate candidate. So we have to, we're going to have to go through that process of recognizing that that's not normally. It's nice to have these typed in because it's easy to check them, you know, because you get the words exactly. But that's why we have there really isn't, this is almost all BMD ballots, not almost all. It's about, there's about 50,000 ballots in this county. 10,000 were hand marked, and about 40,000 were these BMD ballots. And as I said, the big breakthrough for us is that we're looking at these OCR inputs here and decoding them so that these are the ones the voter had the opportunity to confirm and verify. And those are the ones we're using to check it with, as opposed to looking at this barcode. All right. So I believe that covers kind of the overview of what we did here in this case study, showing you the accuracy of our system and how we develop a wealth of information, including being able to understand how these voting systems are not being used properly, or some, I say, quality issues that we have with how they're processing their election. I haven't seen anybody, including all the accredited organizations or Clear Ballot or these other groups, ever talk about how these problems, the fact that these problems exist. And I don't know why. I don't know why they have not, except that maybe they just want to make it seem clean. I mean, even just talking about this right now, saying, gee, we may have found something in the, we may have found something in these areas in Volusia County that might be an issue. Of course, then it gets tweeted and other things, and then misinterpreted by the public. So it's people are reluctant somewhat to ever, mention anything of that nature when they're doing it. Okay, so I see that I've gone on for a while describing this report. There are some other videos that go into it in detail as well, where I also go in. I'd like to now, any questions that anybody has that would be about this or anything else at this time. I mean, if you want to raise your hand.
Want to go through the chat? There are a lot of questions in the chat.
Okay, thank you for that. let's see here where I can get, is this still being shared? I can't see where my thing is. Let's see here. Oh, there it is. Okay. All right, let me stop share. Let's see the chat room at the same time. Okay, so let's go through each one of these. Wow, we got a lot of things. What is CMP? Comparison, yeah. So it's just a shorthand for CMP CVR for compare the cast vote records. So to compare the two cast vote records together is what CMP means. What is the definition of bias? Larry Moore, I'm not sure what, how, but generally a bias in a general term means that you have an offset, you know, from what is perhaps true to what you think is true. An offset of some kind is a bias. Yeah, it depends on the field that you use it in. You know, in the world of transistors, there's this thing called the bias, which moves up the voltage up so that it can be in an active range. So it puts up the bias, right? The bias current. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that thing is used. So maybe, Larry, you want to maybe detail that out with a better question so I can know what you mean. Yeah, so Ellen did send me a whole bunch of ballots, and I'm still working on copying those because they were so big. And I'm not surprised at all that there's a lot of stretched ballots from those old machines that they have in Florida. But again, we will be working on being able to deal with those. Clarify whether 40K duplicated ballots in St. Lucie means votes on those ballots were counted twice. Okay, so the first 40K number that I came up with was the shortage of the number of the ballots that we did not have when we first were given the ballot images. They were short by 41,000. Then we says, okay, you're short by 41,000. Can you give us a new set of ballot images? They did. And then we were short 4,000. And in the end, when we resolved this, 4,904. We were short, we had additional ballot images, 4,904. And the council record entries matched those. And in the official results, did not have those. So were they duplicated ballot? Oh, 40K, oh, you're talking about St. Lucie. No, the ballots in, I'm sorry. So reject everything I said. We're going over a different county. In St. Lucie County, tell you what, let me go back also so I can remember. But I'll go back up here to St. Lucie. It was kind of the last one that was done here. So it's right here. The issue was that when we first got the zip, when we first got the archives, okay, are you seeing this, what I'm highlighting? I hope so. All right, so when we first got these archives, we had a first archives 1 through 7, and then we had an archive 8, which was really big and 24 gigabytes. We decided to cut that up into 3 pieces, and we did. We had archives 8A, B, and 8C, and it turns out, miraculously, I don't know how we thought of it, you got this right, but archive 8A was exactly 7.
Ray, can I interrupt? This is my question, and
Yeah, so what
really, I thought it was a yes/no answer.
okay.
Like, are you saying, when you said that there were 40,000 duplicate that had been duplicated,
Yeah.
and it just wasn't clear what the implication of that was for the vote count, whether you're saying that 40,000 votes got counted twice.
No, so actually what I'm saying is that the files just got duplicated so that the ballot numbers were the same. So we had not the new numbers, like we had other case of Volusia where we had the same ballot scanned twice, that kind of a duplication. Here it was, we had the same number delivered to us with the same information about that ballot twice.
So you were able to tell that it was a duplicate, and it's not an indication that the county double counted votes.
Right.
Okay,
Because-
that's all I wanted to know.
Yeah, that's and for a second there, I didn't understand the question. I was off track.
Okay,
So okay, good.
thanks.
Let's go on to the next one then. Now, Tim White says, is it a simple push button operation to sort all the images into VBM, hand-marked paper ballots, in-person hand-marked paper ballots, BMDs, remote BMDs, duplicated, provisional? Okay, so let's basically vote by mail, hand-marked paper ballots, and in-person hand-marked paper ballots. Usually we can tell. In other words, we only get this information if we get it, right? So if they don't extract out, how the hand-marked paper ballot was generated, then we're not going to know. So, but a lot of times it is. And so they'll be grouped by the grouping, either in the cast vote record or in the zip file itself, the hierarchy in the zip file. BMD ballots, if we get the cast vote record, we can tell those, but they're really small. So it's kind of easy to tell and split those off and know exactly which ones those are. Remote BMD ballots, so far I haven't seen any of those. So I don't know if they're remote or local. If they look the same to me, then I'm not. So the answer is no, I'm not getting those yet. Duplicated ballots. Okay, so there's a different word, duplicated, here. This means the ballots that were damaged somehow or something else in the election office had to take it and make a duplicate of the ballot and then process that one. We're generally not aware of duplicated ballots at this type. In other words, we're aware of once the ballot has an image. All right, so I don't think we get that, but that would be a good thing to add on. Provisional ballots sometimes are marked as provisional, so we would know. And then, is it revealing to compare separate tally? It might be. So far, the disagreed ballots across different sorts, I think that would be revealing to see, when. But of course, let's face it, most of the disagreed ballots happen because of voter intent issues on hand-marked paper ballots. And it's a very, very small percentage where we disagree. And so we're talking about a fraction of like 0.25, like a quarter of 1%, or less. That would be kind of a big one. Okay, now it appears that AuditEngine permits a vastly extended ability to sniff out anomalies. Yeah, and you know what? We can continue to improve that. As we find out an anomaly that we think we need to sniff it out, then we can improve our ability to find it. There are other ways to reduce the data size. Yeah, these files, just that one thing of getting rid of the grayscale, the gray behind the title, how important is that? And an easy thing to do. We get much better scans if we eliminate that background. In Volusia, where a lot of voters apparently left with their ballots, were BMDs in use? No. Basically, in Volusia BMDs, there was 132 total BMD ballots there. There was only 39 in all of Collier County. So these are in Florida, the BMDs are not heavily used at all. And I didn't see any in St. Lucie, so I just don't think they have them there in St. Lucie. And then the question is, 66, is that a big number? I don't think that's a big number. It doesn't seem like a huge number of people who maybe went in, got their ballot, and decided that, I don't know what they would decide. I don't know why someone would go to the trouble going to the polling place and then decide that, yeah, I'm not going to vote after all. But it does happen. So maybe it's sort of a protest. What if they think a lot of people are going to do this? We'll show them by not voting. Of course, it doesn't show anything. Uh, So were they ballot images saved for early voting? I'm not sure what your question there, which set you were talking about, but yeah, the ballot images are saved for early voting. In that diagram I was showing you, maybe that is what you were thinking of. So going back to that really quick, what we have is that the early vote thumb drives were processed through the tabulation, then sent on to tabulation 2. This is how I envision it in my mind. Then they cleared this. They cleared out tabulation 1, but they were still in tabulation 2. Then they scanned them. They took all those ballots and rescanned them. Now those are in tabulation 1, but only one set. But they were combined, and now we have duplicates in tabulation 2 of all those ballots. Then they have cellular uploads. They only went into tabulation 1. There's no ballot images. They don't get into tabulation 2. Then the election day thumb drives, not all of them were included, so some of them were missing. Those only got into tabulation 2. There was no comparison here at the end to figure this out. ES&S doesn't provide it. It has poor tracking, and I've heard this from Duncan Buell as well, who was saying that in his review of this too, a lot of people were, or a lot of ES&S counties have poor tracking. So getting these thumb drives in input is a loosey-goosey operation without a lot of controls. And that is, okay, so now let's see, have to leave. Okay, Mimi Kennedy, I think she came back and forth there, but she said, oh my God, this is so valuable. Thank you. I have to process it many times to understand. But here it is, all these failures, not to say, but to improve, 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 yeah. So this is the point instead.
Before you go on, Ray, I had a quick question.
Yeah.
About Emily's comment. People who come in and left with their ballots can't, in a polling place, don't you resolve the number of ballots given out with the number of signatures?
Yeah, but I mean, what if it doesn't? You know, if it doesn't match, you still have to send them in. Yeah, you can't always resolve them. And I did this study here in San Diego where we said, let's take 5% of the precincts and look at everything that we can. We looked at the sign-in sheets. We looked at what they call the ballot statements, which says how many ballots came and went, how many were spoiled, how much were voted, how many were still blank at the end, and so forth. How many then got scanned by the voting system and the central count, because that's where they do it. They just have people vote on paper in the polling place, no scanning. They're all transported to the central facility where they're scanned. And then we looked at how many were scanned. And there was first of all, the astounding things. Only 15% of all those things did match. 85% of the time, something was wrong. And in many, many cases, the workers in the polling place just gave up, threw up their hands and says, we can't figure this out. They could not get the ballot statement to total up. And so they just gave up and said, let them, I'm not going to stay here all night. I'm just going to send these in and let them deal with it. Then you had a 6% fallout between what was the count from the polling place and what was scanned in the central office. Eventually, I figured this out. What they did was they would remove anything that was the least bit hokey or, ripped or, somebody marked on it differently, or it could be a problem later. They'd remove those right away, and they only processed the ones that looked really good. And those are the ones they audited. So they didn't audit the ones that were, that they should have, just to check that everything went well. They took all those out. And then eventually they would come back in, but they weren't included in that original audit, even though they claimed that they audited everything and the early vote, on election day and the vote by mails, not included. So there was a bunch of problems. And
Okay,
so no, so they don't necessarily have that, to answer your question, Darlene. You don't necessarily get that. Okay, now going on to Neil, are your disagreement counts related to sheets with any disagreement or marks that disagreed? And it depends. So if we have a whole sheet that agrees, it's just one record, agreement. If we have a sheet that agrees and is blank, that gets 2 records, one in the agreed and one that says blank. So you get 2 records for one that's agreed and blank. Doesn't have to grab it. If you have 2 records, if it's agreed and it's an overvote. We have it in the agreed pile and in the overvote pile, agreed. Now, if it's disagreed, every single record is a contest. So in this contest, there's a disagreement, that's a record. Same ballot, next contest, it was disagreed to, that's another record. So you could have dozens of records for one ballot if all the contests didn't disagree. It happens sometimes. You get a stretch in it, and then if everything shifts down, then we might all disagree. And you know what? It's interesting that even with those stretch ballots, the voting systems do pretty well with those, and I'm surprised. Calling a stretch ballot seems misleading. It's a stretch image or a feeding speed issue. Yes. It's a stretched ballot image. Okay, it's a stretched ballot image. And is it stretched? No, it actually isn't stretched. It's actually the same dimensions as a regular image, but there's a section in there that's pulled apart. So call it what you want, but true, it's a little bit. Is that yours, Neil?
Yeah, that was one of mine. So
Okay.
going back to the disagreement count, I would just encourage, I love all the statistics you got, but it would be useful just in terms of standardized terminology to also report what the VVSG in its testing refers to as the percentage of marks that are wrong or discrepant or whatever. So that would only count each circle on the ballot that could be a mark or not a mark, and just count how many are different in the 2 interpretations of the ballot. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but yes, it does make sense. But I think that gives you a number that's super often, that's like a super, high correspondence number, and not nearly as, in other words, you're going to have so many.
That's actually one of the points. One of the points is that the VVSG, people will quote how it says, this is 1 in 500,000 or whatever. Only discrepancy 1 in 500,000. But if each contest has 10 marks on it, then that's 1 in 50,000 contests, and that's a bigger deal. So I would just report it so that people can compare it with the VVSG and make the point that you're making.
I see. Yeah, this is a good point. I'll take a look at that, because that would actually make our results look even better. All right. So, but we did. I was sharing there just for a second. Let me just point this out just to make sure everybody, because I did have to. Like if there's agreed, that's resolved to the sheet always. It's a sheet issue. Blanks, same thing. Overvotes. Now that's doesn't validate the sheet. That's on a per. Well, it's agreed, but how many overvotes were? They could have multiple overvotes for a sheet. And then disagreed. I did resolve that and say, how many sheets had disagreements on them. But that's a good input. I appreciate that, Neil. So let's go on here. And see where we were. Disagreement counts. Yeah. Calling it stretch ballot. Okay. One of the many issues that underscores the need to always remember the images are not a faithful representation of the actual paper ballot of record. It is, but you know what? If we only look at the paper ballot, we wouldn't know about these issues with how bad maybe the stretching or whatever the image corruption is that we would be dealing with. And, we do want to look back at the paper, so I'm not against that. A few questions from Stephen on Maricopa. So let's put those off for a second. He said, how long would it take to set up a mapping if there's 1,800 styles and Spanish? I think it takes, on a per bubble basis about, a couple of seconds to, put them over there. There's some overhead to that as well, but then you have 1,800 styles times how many are on the ballot. You could just resolve it that way and figure out how long it would take if you just did it every single one. Depends on how often they change. So when we're doing the mapping, what we find is that from ballot to ballot, like even though they say this is a different style, it's not. Okay, so everything is the same. And so you take what you had before, you say copy, and you paste it on there. And the way our paste works is that if there's a contest that is not, still on that ballot, it just takes it off. And it alerts you if there's anything that is not, the same. And then you can go in and fill those in. So it's very easy doing the copying. So you can really, and you can also copy if okay, this is very frequently this happens. Like in Collier County, the second sheet was the same for everybody. No difference. No, all the styles had exactly the same second sheet. It was all just the constitutional amendments. So it was the same. So we have a thing, you just do it once and you say copy to all the rest of them. It copies it to all the rest of the second sheet. And then you don't have to do them at all. So there's a lot of, reduction in time that we've factored into the application of how it works. Also, the other thing that we're adding to this is the ability to have more than one person work on it at a time. So we're going to be able to have teams of, dozens of people, take a chunk, like you take that first, 100, I'll take the next 100 and so forth. And then you can split it up and get it done very rapidly. But it still does take work. Again, we tried to do this automatically. I don't know if I said this, but we tried to do it like almost magically automatically. But it turns out to be almost even more manual information than we needed to put in to get the algorithm to do it than it was just to do it, and so much simpler to understand than, okay, I want the algorithm to do this. And then what do I have to do to set it up so the algorithm can do it versus, okay, I'm just going to put the bubble in. So it's so much easier to train people about, let's just put the bubbles on there. So I'll come back to those. Yeah, so Paul Burke said it, speaking as a poll worker, it's not always possible to resolve differences. Yeah, so true. I mean, you're tired. And Volusia said they checked the cellular results against the poll tapes. Yeah, I think they did. I mean, they certainly had a big problem. They had these, and maybe they knew about it, but certainly they didn't report on it. So I think they did get good results out of Volusia despite these failings of the SNS. And so I don't want to really degrade them too much on that aspect. Okay, going back to these other questions about Maricopa County, we have, I'll fill you in a little bit there. We have not reached full agreement with them yet. We have made a proposal and it's gone around a few times, mostly with regard to transparency. I mean, from our point of view, we'd like it to be completely transparent, but we understand that there's court cases and there's also a media that's poised to pick up any little thing and then basically put it on the tip of a spear and carry it around the stadium like it's captured prey. So it is hard to either side, right? There's these sides that are ready to pounce on it, and also I mean, I have to do a lot of work on this, so I'm going to be kind of happy to have a gag order to refer to say, look, I can't give you an interview until the end because I can't spend all my time talking to the media or defending something partway through when we're trying to get everything, and things will come up, maybe not, maybe it'd be as clean as Collier, where it's down to the 39 and we resolve that. But more likely than not, with 2.1 million ballots, there's going to be some issues that we encounter where some things are not going to match. We're also certainly going to have quite a few disagreements where we found, usually it's an undervote that they did not find. And I'm talking about on the order of approximately 5,000 of those, I'm guessing, that we would find that we would want to look through. And because the total deviation for the state was only 10,000. So given those two things of the transparency versus, the need to have some restriction on the information flow, which I acknowledge is in this real situation, like you think, okay, well, we can do an audit, it'll be fine, we just close ourselves into a room. No, this is where everyone is watching this. So it isn't as simple as some of those theories might be. So Ellen says, from what I understand, Biden won Maricopa by 40,000, the state 10,000. Yeah, the state is what we're looking at, though. It's a 0.31% difference across the state. And so you have to look at a 0.31% difference in Maricopa County, to be fair, not say it was 40,000, because that's like a 2%. And so if it's a 0.31% and only 10,000 statewide, in Maricopa County, it's less than 10,000 that we're looking for. About 5,000 probably, if you want to be fair, about, not saying that they all have to. You could say, well, I think they're all coming out of Maricopa County. But that would flip the presidential contest if you did that. But there's some other contests that are in question as well, and that we want to check. Our system works best when we get all of the bubbles, because I don't know if I showed you, but our algorithm for determining voter intent takes into account how the person tends to color it in. Do they, color it really good and solid, or do they just put a little dash in there? Or do they tend to check it and then not cover it very well? And so we can kind of look and see, okay, well, this person, they make dark marks all the way through, and this one they didn't mark it dark. Well, that isn't a bubble then, if they didn't mark it the same as the other bubbles. So we make that determination by checking all of the bubbles. So it really helps us to check all the contests on the ballot because of that. Also, we're curious, how did those contests do down ballot? There's some other contests, the county level contests, that were quite contentious. I understand one of them was within 5,000 votes. So, yeah, someone say something?
Yeah, Ray, this is Steve.
Okay.
So thank you for all this, and I really appreciate it. The latest I've heard is that it looks like the Senate's contractors are going to be in that stadium through the end of this month, and maybe longer, but at least that long. So I'm just trying to get a sense of possible timelines, because once they're done and they leave that stadium, there's going to be tremendous pressure on them, whether they have a report or not, to start saying something. And that's why I was asking you, before, how long does it take to set up the mapping and then proceed from there? So what's your thoughts? I mean, I don't know really how long it takes to do something on the scale of Maricopa County. That's why I'm asking.
Well, the mapping is the part that takes time, but also there may be issues with regard to, like I said, the files. The files themselves, I'm a little bit worried about them, because remember, or be aware of the fact that Cyber Ninjas and their group took custody of the, all the data, all the ballots and everything from the county. They were actually kind of dumped on. The Senate said, you're going to have to comply, and the county says, okay, put it all in a truck, and then, it's driving up your driveway. Tell them what to do. I mean, they basically made it as big a problem as possible for the Senate, and have been very uncooperative, which for me, I'm wondering, okay, why are they being so uncooperative? what is it about this? And that's why I want to do, this audit, to find those down ballot contests to see. But how long would it take? I just don't know enough about it. I think that first part, like I said, the files, if we have to take the files from Cyber Ninjas, I don't know what kind of condition they're going to be in. Are they going to be organized the same way that we're used to? Or are they going to be organized some other way? And then if they are some other way, they may take just some time just to put them in the same form. There's some question then, how the files, are they pure? Have they been modified? I hope not. But we can always go back to the county and say, well, if somebody thinks they've been modified, let's get the real ones, the blessed ones from you. You say you've done an audit, you're sure that these are right now, so give us the ones that are reflective of the election exactly. And if I can get the Senate to sign off on a release of those ballot images to citizens oversight under our custody. Now, we're not going to be able to release them to the public like I'd like to, say, just look through all these and see what's there. We have to keep them under control, which we can do. We have a secure cloud, storage that no one can look at. And then we, so that's what I'm saying is that piece there that normally would be kind of like no time at all, may take quite a bit of time. The mapping itself, I don't think that could take more than, say a week or two at the absolute most, if we really had trouble with it. Extracting and doing the stuff, there's usually some issues that come up. Now on this ballot has a little bit different coding scheme. It's a different length barcode than we're used to, and that's a Dominion custom barcode, so we're going to have to adapt to that. We've already put that in the code, but we still have to try it. Those sort of things. So I hate to pin down and say, it's going to take this amount of time because there's so many unknowns. But right now we're in the process of enhancing the mapping thing because it went so well when we tried it. We had just a first cut of that application that runs in a browser, and that ran so well and helped us so much that we just went for a second round on that. And now we're going to be adding multiple users at a time, and so we can get a team of people to do that. The other thing that may take more time right now is we wanted to have an observers panel that would be able to come on board like this, like we are right now in a Zoom meeting, where I would run through at least a stage, like we would put it up and we'd run a stage through we would run one of the phases of processing and then let everybody check it, see how the results were, look at this and that, and I can walk through different ways to examine the data so that the people that are watching are confident that, yeah, okay, that did what you said it did. Most of them are simple. I mean, most of the steps are just making a list of, an inventory or something else that you can very easily check. But it's to give us visibility. I mean, if somebody just dumps on you a bunch of zip files, you have to know what's in there. And so you have to have some reports and compare it. And, once you get to that point and you get a report and you're comparing, and you go, okay, this is the number we thought it was. It should come out where here's a number of ballot images that matches the number and so forth. We get to that point where we got the ballot images, then we can, we don't have to spend that time. So that's why, no, I can't tell you. I think, to be honest, I think they're delaying our contract because, again, they don't want us to come up and come up with something ahead of them. But I'll tell you this, they're developing a lot of data in their count. They're entering it feverishly into their system. I don't think they have any software or anything to really analyze that. It's all being done by hand. It's just a ton of work, what they're doing. And so I think they've totally, not estimated the amount of time it's going to take them very well. And I don't think they're going to be done by the end of June.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we do want to get this we'd like to get this contract because we think that this will be a good check on everything, whether, some people would say, we don't like this, we don't trust the cyber ninjas, or we do trust them, one way or the other. It's good to have another check, okay, a secondary check on what they're doing. They can check on what we're doing and so forth, and we can check on what the county does. I think ours is going to be the best audit, the most detailed, because we can go back to every single ballot image and say, look at that. That's where they put a little tiny mark. Now let's get that ballot and pull out the physical ballot and find that one and check it. And if we can find that one ballot out of that big pile of 2.1 million, that will be quite a bit of confidence that, number one, they've organized the ballot paper pretty well. Have no control of that. But also then, hey, this ballot image is what it looks just like the original. You do that a few times and people will start to say, wow, this has a lot of correlation in many ways. You don't have to do tons of it for that confidence level to get in there. Statistically, though, it would be best if we would rescan maybe around 400 batches to make absolutely sure that nothing was done with the paper. But I think that we're going to have enough correspondence with their hand count, even though it's, as some people have said, it's not going to be too reliable. I just don't know. I think it might be quite good. And then they would have some numbers that would be pretty close to what our numbers are, but we would go in very much more detail. I can tell you this, I am expecting some issues like we saw in Volusia County of some kind, with 2.1 million, that's such a big job. Something's got to be a little bit off. Not to flip anything, probably. But also, when you saw there, the alert of the 2 tabulations, that they keep it in their machines, that's a worrisome point.
But Ray, that's ESNS. This is Dominion, right?
Yeah,
or
that
is
was
there a
the SNS. No, this is Dominion. It's a different manufacturer, that's true.
But is there a double tabulator that you found in Dominion?
No, I haven't seen that yet. But it's bound. I'm just giving that as an example of whenever I do these, I never know what I'm going to find. You find something and then you learn a lot, each time. It is kind of, it's a big challenge to do 2.1 million, but we have, unlike other offerings, we are using the cloud. We can use up to 10,000 computers at a time. And when you launch the computers, it launches all of them in just, a matter of seconds. Then you have 10,000 computers working at once. It does cost money to do this. So it's not free to run 10,000 computers. If you do that for 15 minutes, which is the maximum amount of time you can spend with one computer that you rent for that type, then it's like running a single computer for like 4 weeks. So I could run a single computer and go through the ballots like once a second. If I go through the BMD ballots, it takes about every 2 to 2.5 to 3 seconds, because reading the OCR is much slower. And we could do it faster if we just read that QR code, but that's not the goal. The goal is to actually verify what people could read. So we're doing it a little more, much more in depth than just a recount or something else with those ballots. So it is doable for us to do this. We've had enough experience that the quality is there. We can handle any issues that come up and deal with them, and maybe modify the code, because it is our code base. We know all there is about it, and so we can make changes as necessary. People have something they need, like what was just suggested by Neil, to come up with a little bit different statistic that would be nice to show, so it matches. We'll do that. It's easy to do. So okay, good. Any other? So that's where we stand. There is of course pushback against by other people that don't want us to do it or something. It's a lot of politics. But I think that at this point, given that we came out with this case study and that we can show that this is a very revealing kind of audit to do, and that it's available. They're willing to do it. If they don't do it, then, okay, you can make your own conclusions. Then what, you know? Then I guess you can say, well, you know, they're not serious about really doing an audit or really finding out what the facts were. That's what I would say, if they're not willing to do it. I think also, though, what we have to say is that there's been a lot of pushback against this audit and other audits that's been unwarranted. We do need to do more audits. I would like to do a lot more across the nation because I've been finding so much crap. Not that it would necessarily flip anything, but we need to really get the quality level up. And you can't do that unless you provide intense oversight and you call them on their bad quality. And these vendors like ES&S are just producing software that is unhelpful to the election officials on getting their job done. So, okay, so I can see a couple more questions. I guess Neil says, what was the net margin discrepancy in each election that you audited? Well, we've had to look at it on a per contest basis probably. And these numbers that you were just seeing, let me look at those again really quick. When we say a discrepancy here, the number that are disagreed, that's across all contests on the ballot. Now, a given contest will not show up very often amongst those that are disagreed. So then the, you know, what we're doing though, if we disagree with the voting system, we're also fixing it 93% of the time. And so we're up to like 99.998 or something like that accuracy. And it's only going to get better, you know, as we improve things. So we have repeated question. Why, repeated, oh, okay, I guess I didn't answer it. What is your response to people who are asking why on earth yet another count is needed in Arizona? Well, we had one count by the county. We had the county do an audit of themselves in a way that was legal, but not a good system where they chose 52 in advance, then hand counted 26 of them. So they knew 14 days in advance which ones were going to be chosen. Then they hand counted the half of them. And then they found no discrepancies. So in my mind, they fixed them up as they went, which you can do. You can say, well, what was wrong here? Let's fix it. You're not really allowed to do that in an audit. So since they found no discrepancies whatsoever, it indicates to me that they actually fixed the audit as they went and gave themselves an A, just like a middle schooler grading their own test. So it's basically worthless, just theater. The other audit that was done by the Election Assistance Commission, EAC people, was not an audit at all. It was actually just a check of the machines. It was what they call a logic and accuracy test, where they run a whole bunch of pre-filled out ballots that they knew what the count was for those through the machines. And I think what they did was they actually checked the results of each machine, that it was correct. They didn't do the things that we found were the most problematic, which was getting the stuff from the field, bringing it in, and uploading it into the election management system. There's a lot of room for error in that whole process. They didn't do that. They didn't have the normal thing. Maybe, I just don't know exactly what they did. But from when I read through it, they also adjudicated their results. They said adjudication, so they weren't reporting the raw results. So again, that is not really an audit because it does not look at historic history. Audits have to do with history. you look at a historical record, you look at ones that are historical as well, but at a different point in time, and you compare them. That's an audit. If you're not doing any history and you're just checking how a machine runs today, that's a test of the machine today, not one back then. So, so I do think it's a legitimate thing for the Senate to want to do an audit. Okay, so so my response to people who are asking why on earth yet another count is because I'm a little bit concerned about the Cyber Ninjas audit, how they're doing it, how they've already said that there might be some bias, and then they you know, proceeded to do it and maybe come up with an answer. We haven't seen any intermediate results or anything yet. So it'd be nice to have yet another check on that. And then repeated, can you fill us in on where things are with the Arizona contract? I think I did that. We're still in negotiations with them. The ball is in their court. That's where we are right now. The ball is in their court. They have to come back with their final version of things. We hit the ball back with, you know, they give us one with the suppressive, brutal contract with all kinds of provisions where we take full liability for everything under the sun and no transparency whatsoever. We hit the ball back with the, you know, observers panel and other, you know, more transparency. And it is in their court. I have to say this, it is in the court order that the Senate has to keep control and security and basically, you know, don't reveal the data. And so we're going to try to comply with that. I don't think it's necessary what they asked for, but that's still what the order is. And so they're going to want that to be secure and not revealed to the public. So it can't be fully transparent the way we'd like it to be. And so now, after we hit the ball back to them, they've been processing it. Since then, the article went out in the Arizona Republic, and then there was, you know, they were doing some more vetting of, you know, who I am and my background, which, you know, I have a kind of a colorful background, I'll admit that. But color is good in life, you know, you don't want to just be bland. So they're trying to chew on that. John, you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to add to that, there are people, you know, there's good and bad in everything. Okay, I think Ken Bennett is a wonderful human being. I've been working really well with him. He really wants this. Okay, Senator Fahn, the reason they're doing this audit, she knows there was no other 3 audits. She knows that 78% of their constituents are demanding this. And a lot of these things that we're doing there are necessary because of other people who spread terrible things. Well, the pushback that's going on right now is by those people, the people who do want this thing to continue and go into another state. And they're very fearful of Ray Lutz. They've already accused him of being a communist. He gets his funding from George Soros, that he's going to rig those results to make sure that it passes and follows the first one. These are some of the craziest statements that some of these people, because some of these people really believe it was stolen, where I don't. You know, I follow this election like no other. Okay, I spent 3 weeks in August. I was at 2 of the 3 of these audits that were not really audits. And so really it's for us to be patient right now. Ken is on holiday with his family. He's worked very hard, and Monday get with him and get this thing finalized. And that's what has to happen. They cannot, they're in trouble. They're going to wind up by having the 3rd audit. Is that we got the original count is what we're going to wind up is 1 that Dominion and Maricopa County did. Then there will be the hand count. The hand count will be slightly flawed because they're not dealing with adjudicated ballots and there's human error. But I don't think they're going to play around with it, but time will tell. And then, of course, the most important audit is what the machine counted, is the ballot images, and that is what was Ray running. And then the third most important file is, of course, the cast vote record, which Larry and other people are using. And they're really backing up the findings that we already knew, that there was a lot of Trump voters who turned out not to vote for Trump. In the top two races, they voted one way. And you can see that on the cast vote record. But hey, that's the third file. That's the one that can easily be changed because we're looking for everything. You know, because of Dr. Shiva coming in November 30th, and other statements said they believe in fraction magic was used. A lot of these people believe that 40,000 ballots came in. They got microscopes looking at the Biden vote to see, is it a real human mark or was it sprayed on? I mean, all these things sound crazy, but they're not. They're necessary to help people become unhinged. And this third audit is very important. If this third audit is shut down and not allowed to happen, I think there's going to be big problems because too many people know about what these ballot images and the capacity and for looking at everything on the ballot. Other than that, Ray, I thought you did a great presentation. I learned a lot. And I want to thank you for all the time you put into this.
But let me try to answer this last question here. Okay, so this is a kind of important one from Darlene. Does that mean the results from the audit engine will not be made public? Okay, that's a good question because, of course, we want these reports like you've just been looking at, the discrepancy report and everything, to be public at some point. But they're going to need to become public all at once. You know, when we've gotten everything, the full report done, it has to be submitted to the Senate. They then are going to check it, I guess. You know, anyway, they want to control it. I'm only a little bit worried about that, what that means. We wrote in our last draft of the agreement that they would not be able to shelve it, that it would come out after a certain period of time, no matter what. Because there would be a chance they would say, okay, we got your result. We're just going to continue to make it secret and never publicize it and say whatever the hell we want. So, so we do want it to come out, but we have to recognize that we, you know, our observers panel will be under a non-disclosure agreement. I'll be under a non-disclosure agreement, so I can't say how it's going or what the results are and intermediate results until that final thing comes out. Okay. All right, Neil, go ahead. You got. Let's make this the last question. Go ahead, Neil.
Just real quickly, I agree strongly that one of the benefits that I don't think you've mentioned is that your image compare.
Okay, you're breaking up. Try my image
Be broken down by batch, by tabulator. Your image comparison would be broken down by batch, by tabulator. It would be a comparable comparison. It's unclear how easy that will be for the cyber ninjas. And the other thing I want to really recommend, it apparently is not yet, they're not yet going to agree to release the images themselves, which is going to be the most important thing about an image audit in a lot of ways. But what I would encourage you to demand, what would really help is if you can publish a cast vote record and a secure hash of each image that you disagree on, so that you can.
Okay, well, we're wanting to produce the discrepancy report that I was showing you, where
map your results to the reality,
where all the disagreements would be shown. Okay, and I've never seen one where I said, okay, well, that I can tell exactly who voted on that ballot. I've never seen one like that. All right, so I don't think that there's going to be. It could be.
No, but I'm about publishing all the ballot image hashes and your interpretation of all the ballot image hashes.
Yeah.
Of all the ballot.
So,
because that way, in the future, when the images are hopefully released, we'll be able to go back and say, well, Ray's interpretation was this. Here's the original cast vote record.
Yeah. No, that's the goal, and yeah, we would want to do that.
Here's the
So-
original. We all agree on what.
Okay, so yeah, we do want to make that so we can go back and do that. Okay, so I'm going to thank everybody for being here and all the questions, and then we will see what happens. Hopefully this will be going forward, and then this will be quite an exciting adventure. Okay, thank you very much. Bye now.